All right, thank you for that. So, which means, of course, it's not that the white farmers they were all driven away from Zimbabwe. They are still there. They still have access to land if they want to farm. They can still farm just like they will farm like every other Zimbabwe. They can just like if Zimbabwe want to own land to farm, they can farm. If you are a white person, you want to farm, you have access to land, you can farm. Is it correct? Or if you are a white person, you cannot own land in Zimbabwe?
No. What is if you are a white person and you would want to farm in Zimbabwe, you have every right to do so, like any black, like any other farmer in the country. And those that, and I must emphasize that the Zimbabwean government in the 1980s never intended and never drove whites out of the country. The hand of reconciliation that was extended to them was to make sure that they continue to live in the country in the manner that they had lived before, but now respecting the fact that we are all equal. Racial inequality that existed yesterday is what our liberation heroes fought against. They fought against racial inequality. And when independence, at the dawn of independence, it meant that all races were equal. And that is what it is even today. Whites, blacks, they are equal. They are treated in the same manner. If you are a farmer, a white farmer, you are given land, you will farm, and you will be treated equally. And those that are still ready to come back to Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe is open. If land is there and they prove that they are Zimbabweans, they will definitely get land. Nobody is denied land as long as you are Zimbabwean.
Thank you for that. You see, it is important, this particular argument, and of course, it should be important, not only in the case of Zimbabwe, just that the Zimbabwe, thanks to the leadership of Robert Mugabe, decided to take a drastic step, whereas many other African leaders will be there begging and renegotiating the term of agreement, term that they didn't write, that are drafted maybe in Washington or Rome or in London. They will tell them, come and sign, they sign. And that is where we are today. Many wildlife in Africa are controlled by the European, and we think it is normal. It is not normal. No, there is no country in Europe that is controlled by other people. The countries in Europe are controlled by the European. So when Africans say that we want to control our resources, it is not too much to ask for. It is the right thing to do. And for the fact that you are a European, you are living in Africa, that African people want to treat you like they treat other people, you should be happy that that is the way it is. So you cannot go to another man's land. I want to be the Lord of their land. I want to impose yourself. Of course, it is true that when the people are not saying, let's go back to a kind of a level playing field, it is true that you are not going to be having those privileges anymore. It makes sense that they want to fight. But to the people who own the land, they say this is how they want the system to run. If you are not satisfied, go back to where you are coming from. Because that is it everywhere. No Africa can go to England and say they are going to take the land from the English people. The English people will not accept that. If you cannot accept it in your country, why do it in another man's country? What kind of justice are you talking about?
Robert Mugabe, as a leader, his legacy is a rich one. When he took over as the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe in 1980, education was one of his priorities. In 1980, we had 1,177. We had 177 schools. By 1990, we had 1,548 schools. And if you look at that, you will see that the percentage increase was very huge. He also increased the number of programs for adult literacy to a point where in 1980 we had 62% as the literacy rate. And by the 1990, we were hovering around 82%. And at some point, we were the highest in Africa, courtesy of the education policies and programs and prioritization that Robert Mugabe made on education, because he believed in the empowerment of the Black majority in terms of education. The health sector was also one of his strongest area that he worked on, and increased the number of hospitals and clinics so that they are within accessible distance. He did not only increase the numerical number of hospitals, but even the quality, excuse me, of hospital services that were provided also was bettered and was accessible to the majority of the Black people. We no longer had hospitals that were exclusively meant for whites, or clinics that were exclusively meant for whites and others meant for Blacks. He did away with what was termed the FET schools, which were exclusively meant for Blacks, and made sure that they entered in the mainstream, in terms of education. Whereas in the past, the majority of the Blacks would be confined to building, woodwork, or carpentry, and the other, and teaching, and becoming a policeman. Robert Mugabe made sure that people were empowered educationally and could access anywhere, any employment that they would, depending on their qualifications which they got. The number of universities were also increased. The other legacy of President Mugabe, of the former president, Comrade Robert Mugabe, is that of his ideals in terms of empowerment, Black empowerment. There are quite a number of people today, other than owning land, who are owning mines and other productive sectors in the country. We, at one point, had what was known as the economic empowerment policy, where if one wanted to come and invest in the country, it would go under the 5149 principle, where the owners of the land of the country would get 51% of the shares and 49 to the investor. While that was had some challenges, the idea was to make sure that the Black majority sees opportunities to become masters of their destiny. Robert Mugabe, as we all understand him, is part of his legacy is that he made good noise, not only for the for the Zimbabweans, but for the rest of Africa and all those that are under injustices. He spoke for the voiceless, especially in the United Nations. He made it very clear that we are equal, regardless of our geographical position on the globe. And when he presided over a number of forums, the United Nations, SADC, Nana-aligned movement, and so on, he was quite steadfast and principled in his quest to make sure that the racial injustice and inequality that exists in various platforms should be dealt with, be it at the World Bank, IMF, and some of the Bretton Woods institutions, so that this equality that is needed, there is no lesser human being. There is no lesser human being. And Robert Mugabe believed in the sovereignty of each particular state. He believed in the sovereignty of Zimbabwe, and he respected the sovereignty of all other countries. That is why even today, we still subscribe to the principle of non-interference in the domestic affairs of other countries on the globe.